I'm saved by the bell.
Tamagotchi.
Make it fun. Make it.
Now this.
Well, good morning, church family. How you doing? I'm excited. My name's T.J., pastor at the Shore Church, and we are in this series called I Love the 90's, and we kicked this series off last week, Easter Sunday. It was an incredible Sunday. A lot of firsts for us as a church. We did 3 services for the first time. That was pretty incredible. Highest attendance we've ever had. Highest single service we've ever had at our 10 o'clock service. We were able to raise $8,000 for kids right here in Sarasota. And 37 people made first-time decisions to follow Jesus. Pretty awesome, right? Wow, what a great Sunday. Let's do it again, right? That's what I'm thinking. So I'm excited that you're here. We're in week number 2 of the series, I Love the 90's, and I really do honestly love the 90's. I went through middle school and high school in the 90's, and it was just an incredible time for me personally, and I'm sure it was great for you guys too. But there's a lot of things about the 90's that have changed from then until now. Am I right? A lot of change has gone on. I remember watching episodes of Seinfeld. I go back now, and I watch those same episodes of Seinfeld, and I think if they only had a smartphone, every single episode would be completely pointless, right? Because every episode is, where's George? Where's Kramer? I'm lost in the woods. I'm this, I'm that. It's like, bro, if you just had an iPhone, the whole series is over already, isn't it? Like, so many changes have occurred since then. I remember when I was a kid, renting a movie was an entirely different experience. Like now, I walk into my living room because my kids are like, Dad, can we have a movie night? Sure, kid. I pick up the remote and I'm like, beep, boop, boop, beep, beep, beep. Rented, right? That's all it takes. I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to do anything. Back in the day when I was a kid, I was like, Mom, Dad, can we have a movie night? They're like, let's see how many hours we have to put into this, right? You had to get in your car and you had to go to a place called Blockbuster, right? And getting a Blockbuster card was harder than getting your driver's license because you needed to give them your social security number, your blood type, your firstborn child. I mean, it was tough to get your Blockbuster card. And then you would walk and you would look at thousands of movies all across the room and then finally pick one and then pay $5 to take your VHS home, right? And then you'd get home and you'd load that sucker in, and if you did not have that movie back on time, the late fee was more than the rental fee once you got back there. So you're like, oh my gosh. And so it was hard as a kid to talk your parents into a movie night because it cost just so much. And before you turned the movie in, you had to be kind and rewind, right? Because we're not streaming stuff. You had to wait 3 minutes. Just keeps going, right? And if the person before you, well, they weren't kind, they didn't rewind, there goes your movie night, right? It's just going to take so long to get back to it. But a lot of changes have occurred since then, right? A lot of changes have happened over the last 20 years. And I'm sure a lot of changes have happened in your life over the last 15, 20 years as well. And so here's the question. How do we change well? How do we go through change and get the most out of it? In order to do that, I want to go to the Old Testament to a character named David, and we're going to talk about the changes that David went through. Now, I'm sure you know who David is. Even if you've never been to church before, there's an Israelite king named David. That's the David we're talking about. But we're not talking about him as king yet. We're talking about him as a young boy. And even if you've never heard of King David the Israelite, you've probably heard the phrase David and Goliath, as in David and the giant Goliath. This is even before David fought Goliath. This is at the beginning, the very beginning of David's life. In fact, the story we're about to go to is the very first time we hear of David in the Bible. So 1 Samuel chapter 16, David is about to go through some changes, and I want to bring you 4 thoughts on David's story. Now the Lord said to Samuel, he's the prophet, "You have mourned long enough for Saul. I have rejected him as king of Israel." So the current king of Israel, named Saul, God's like, he's not doing a great job. I'm going to reject him. It's time. You should fill your flask of olive oil and go to Bethlehem. Find a man named Jesse who lives there, for I have selected one of his sons to be my king. There's a new king coming on the scene. So Samuel gets up and he goes all the way to Bethlehem, and he calls Jesse and his sons together. And so it says this, Can you go to verse 6, please? There you go. When he arrived, Samuel took one look at Eliab, who was Jesse's oldest son, and he thought, surely this is the Lord's anointed. But the Lord said to Samuel, said something to Samuel. There you go. The Lord said to Samuel, don't judge by his appearance or height, for I've rejected him. The Lord doesn't see things the way you see them. People judge by outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Then Jesse told his son Abinadab to step forward and walk in front of Samuel. But Samuel said, this is not the one the Lord has chosen. Next, Jesse summoned Shimei, but Samuel said, neither is this the one the Lord has chosen. And the verse continues, in the same way, all 7 of Jesse's sons were presented to Samuel, but Samuel said to Jesse, the Lord has not chosen any of these. Let me pause for a second. God tells Samuel, go to Bethlehem and find Jesse. Find Jesse and bring his sons before me. And I'll tell you which one to be the king. And so Samuel goes through, and this odd thing occurs. All the sons pass by, and none of them are set to be king. So Samuel's out of sons, right? Where's the last son? Is there another son? And so he says this odd kind of question. Then Samuel asks, are these all the sons you have? Like, is there another son that you forgot about? Did you pull a Home Alone and leave Kevin by himself while you came over here? Like where's your last son? Did you forget about him? Where did he go? And then Jesse's like, oh yes, there is one more son. There's still the youngest, he replied, but he's out in the fields watching the sheep and goats. He's kind of the youngest son. He gets the micro jobs, the dirty jobs, right? And they're like, well, the older sons, they'll probably be the one that's going to be king, so we'll leave David here to do all the work while all the other sons go and see which one is supposed to be king. Kind of the forgotten son of Jesse, that's David. But he's out in the fields with the sheep and the goats. Send for him at once, Samuel said. We will not sit down to eat until he arrives. So Jesse sent for him. And then it goes into his description. He was dark and handsome with beautiful eyes. That's David. And the Lord said, this is the one, anoint him. So as David stood there among his brothers, Samuel took the flask of olive oil he had brought and anointed David with the oil. And the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David from that day on, and Samuel returned to Ramah. Talk about a change, an immediate change in someone's life, right? David is with the sheep and goats, the forgotten son of Jesse, out in the pasture. And a servant comes to him and says, hey, come, your father needs you right now. He runs up, father, brothers, all around. Samuel grabs the flask of olive oil, drenches him in it, and says, you're the next king of Israel, and then goes to Ramah and just walks away. Talk about a change. Like, what do we do next, guys? Like, David's probably looking at his dad like, what, brothers, what do I do? I'm all dripping with oil. I'm the next king. What happens? I think his dad's like, well, the sheep still need watching. And so David doesn't go from being anointed as king back to the palace, but instead he goes from being anointed as king back to the pasture. And can you imagine the feelings that David must have had? Can you imagine the idea that, wow, my destiny is in the palace, but my current reality is the pasture, and here I am stuck with all these stupid sheep. I'm supposed to be the king someday, right? But here's the deal. That God was working something in David. And you may be in that same position where you feel like, man, life is not working out the way it's supposed to be. I know God has called me for the palace, but here I am in the pasture. And I don't think this is where I'm supposed to be for the long term, but it's where I find myself right now. It's kind of like Legos. I bought this Anna and Elsa Princess Castle Lego set this week because I'm a dad of, I have 3 girls and my youngest son is 5 weeks old, so he's not playing with these, right? And so if I'm going to spend $1,000 on some Legos, because that's how much they cost, they're like $1 billion, quadrillion to get your Legos. I'm gonna use. This is gonna be useful for more than just a sermon illustration. So I've got my Anna and Elsa castle right here. Now imagine David sitting there going, "Hey, I was made for the palace, but I find myself in the pasture land. I'm supposed to be doing something great. I'm supposed to live in the castle." But when he kind of dumps out the contents of his life, he opens it up. It's all in pieces. And that's kind of what God gave David. How foolish would it be for me to open up this box, dump it on there, and go, it doesn't look like the box, does it? I should take this back. I need to go to Target. Excuse me, Target people. It doesn't look like the box. Can you give me an Elsa castle, please, that's already put together? Well, wouldn't that be foolish? Because the process of putting together the Legos really is the point of Legos, isn't it? The process is the point. And that's my first thought when it comes to David. And it's my first thought when it comes to your life. Really, the process is the point. See, God didn't send David to the palace because David wasn't ready for the palace yet. He sent him to the pasture because there was a process that David needed to walk through in order to become worthy of the palace. Like this castle's not going to materialize because it's just a bunch of pieces thrown together, right? And our life kind of starts just like these pieces. We start out with fragments and dreams and hopes of what could be or might be, and you might find yourself in a season right now where your life looks like it's falling apart, pieces. But God says, I've got something for you. More than pieces, I've got a destiny for you. I've got a palace for you to be living in. But if you are not faithful with the process, with the pieces, while you're out back with the sheep in the pasture, if you miss that opportunity, you're never going to see the palace. Because the process is the point. Even though David found his destiny in the palace, he found his current reality to be the pasture. And there were some lessons that needed to be learned in that process. And you're no different. You may have a dream from God. You may have a calling from God. You may have even given your life to Christ last week or last month or whatever. And you find yourself, I've been a Christian for 4 whole days and nothing looks different. Yeah, because it's a process. God's giving you the pieces and he's asking you, hey, why don't you get in my word a little bit and read? Why don't you spend some time serving someone else? Why don't you follow me with all of your heart and see how I don't grow you into the position I've always had for you? But for now, the process is the point. There's a refinement to it. The next chapter 17 of the book of Samuel, we find David still as a shepherd, but the nation of Israel, King Saul leading them, they've gone into battle with the Philistines. And the Israelites and the Philistines are camped out on 2 hillsides with a valley in the middle. And neither one is willing to attack the other because then they would give up the high ground. And that's a disadvantage for them tactically. And so the Philistines propose a duel. And they say, we'll send out our best fighter and you send out yours. And whoever wins the duel between these 2 men is the victor. And one will become slave to the other. And so the Philistines send out their best man, their best warrior. His name, Goliath. You ever hear of that guy? Giant man, ready to fight. And he taunts the Israelites. And all of Israel is completely scared. But David doesn't know any of this is happening because David's not a warrior. He's a shepherd, right? He's not in the battlefield. He's watching the sheep. He's the youngest. He's still a boy. Until his father calls him one day and he says, hey, shepherd David, why don't you come here? I need you to stop being a shepherd and I need you to start being an errand boy for me. Can you do that? And he's like, okay, well, I'm the youngest son. That's, I guess, what I do around here, right? And so he gets some stuff from his father and he says, I want you to take all this food to your brothers who are warriors, who are older than you, and they're fighting in the battle. So go ahead, take this food to your brothers. So David shows up on the scene, and he looks down in the valley, and he sees this Goliath taunting the nation of Israel. And it's in this moment he recognizes this is my opportunity. I've been preparing for this moment. I've been in the pasture, but now God's about to do something to lead me to this point. I'm a shepherd, but God has something more for me. And so David finds King Saul, and he says this, don't worry about this Philistine, David told Saul. I'll go fight him. The boy, David. Don't be ridiculous, Saul replied. There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. The odds are 0. You cannot make it happen. You're only a boy. You're young. And he's been a man of war since his youth. But David persisted, and look what he says here. I've been taking care of my father's sheep and goats. Really? That's your whole resume for fighting Goliath, right? I've been watching sheep. But here's the deal. While he was watching sheep, God was preparing him. There was a process in it. He could have gone straight to the palace, but he would have failed as a king. He went back to the pasture, and God started to work in him. And he began to learn some lessons, and he began to grow. Watch how the verse continues. When a lion or bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. This is one hardcore boy, isn't it? I mean, oh my goodness. He's getting after it. I've done this with both lions and bears, and now I'll do it again to this pagan Philistine, too. For he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine. And Saul goes, well, I'm impressed. Saul finally consented. All right, go ahead, he said, and may the Lord be with you. May God go with you. Now, the interesting thing about David's season is, though he was promised the palace, he found himself in the pasture. But he didn't take that time in the pasture for granted. He didn't kick his feet up and just go, well, God's got it, and I just have to wait. No. This is the second thought I want to share with you guys. While David was waiting for his time, he was not wasting time. While David was waiting for his time, he was not wasting time. This isn't the waiting room at the DMV when you wait for your number to be called. That's not where David was. He was watching some sheep, and there were bears and lions. That would make the DMV a lot more interesting, wouldn't it? It wasn't like he was sitting around doing nothing. And he could have thought to himself, I'm supposed to be king. Who am I to risk my life rescuing a lamb? The king is far more important than a lamb, than a sheep. Why would I encounter that lion or that bear? Why would I do that? Because David knew that if he was ever going to achieve his destiny, he had to be faithful where he was found. And he had to put in the effort and the work, not wasting time waiting for the destiny, but preparing himself, learning the lessons that God has for him. And I think all of us have been in that season before, haven't we? Where we find ourselves in a period of life where we go, oh my gosh, God, what on earth are you doing here? And he's going, it's a learning season for you. You're in the pasture, and I want you to grow. And so I'm going to send some lessons your way. And here's one thing I've learned throughout my life. The lessons that I refuse to learn or fail to learn are destined to be repeated. And some of you guys have learned that too. Relationship after relationship after relationship. Same problem again and again and again. Why? Because we're failing to learn the lesson. In our financial state, it's the same issue year after year. I get ahead, I get behind. I get ahead, I get behind. Why? Maybe it's the lessons we're failing to learn. Or maybe even your walk with God. You feel so close to him, you feel distant. You feel so close to him, you feel distant. Maybe there's a lesson in the process that God is bringing you through. Though David was waiting for his time, he certainly was not wasting time. Because in this season, he understood what the purpose was, what was supposed to be happening. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1 tells us this. For everything, there's a season. And one of those seasons is waiting. And I do not like it at all. Do you? I'm so terrible at it. Terrible at it. I'll get to that more in a second. But the seasons, there's a season for everything. A time for every activity under heaven. And you may find yourself in a season right now that you can't stand. That's okay. You may be in a season right now that you are loving and you never want it to end. But it will, because you're not done yet. There's a process that God is working in you. And he's working through your life, and he's helping you grow, and he's building you up in this process. There's a season for everything. But how we wait means so much. How we wait. The attitude with which we wait. And that's where that word patience comes in. I'm so bad at it, all right? This is my third thought for you. Patience is not simply the ability to wait. It's how we behave while we're waiting. It's how we behave while we're waiting. Because I can wait for just about anything, but my attitude in the process won't always be nice. Anybody else like that? Okay, I know you're like it. Here, I'm going to prove it, okay? When you go to Target and there are 65 lanes and they only have 2 open, and the line is going down to the grocery aisle, tell me you're waiting well. End of September, early October, the first license plate from Ohio cuts you off. I'm sorry if you're from Ohio. I love you so much. Tell me you're patient. Tell me if you had a gun. Never mind. We ain't gonna go there. Right? Patience is not simply dealing with it, it's how our attitude is shaped. Because me personally, this is one of my greatest challenges in waiting. I don't want to go to the doctor because I don't like sitting around. I don't want to get my license renewed because I don't like sitting around. I don't want to go to a store because I hate waiting in lines. My kids want to go to Disney and I'm like, oh dear Jesus, I'm just like, oh, so many lines, right? I'm just not good at waiting. But God, when we learn how to be patient, especially in the seasons of waiting that God gives us, the results are tremendous. Because when you are patient and you listen to the voice of God in your life, all of a sudden you make better decisions. You're not trying to force it on your own. David could have said, you know what? I'm not dealing with the lion and the bear. I'm just going to move to the capital city and see what happens next. I'm going to do this on my own terms. But how many know that never works? Trying to take shortcuts, trying to do it your own way. Isaiah chapter 40 tells us this: even youths become weak and tired, and young men will fall in exhaustion. That's an example of us doing it in our own strength. Even when you're young, you get worn out. You'll fall down in exhaustion. But those who trust in the Lord will find new strength. One translation says, those who wait upon the Lord will find new strength. When you wait on Him and in His timing, all of a sudden new strength comes into your life. New strength. And they will soar high on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. Even though you're tired and you can't wait well, if you wait on Him, He can give you the strength to make it through your situation. Because listen, at no point does life look easy when you get it all together in one bag, does it? And you look at life and you go, I do not have the strength to endure this. Of course you don't. You were never designed to do life by yourself. You were designed to have a life in conjunction with God, so that He is the one that can help orchestrate your process to take you from the pasture to the palace. He's the one that you lean on. And when we have faith in Him and are faithful to Him, all of a sudden pieces start to come together. It's that time when we can run and not grow weary, where we can walk and not grow faint. David had this kind of faith. David had this kind of trust in God. And even when he was in private, out in the pasture lands with the sheep, God showed Himself faithful. And so that when David got in front of everyone on the battlefield, he knew God was God, and He was going to do the same thing. It was in the back end, the preparation side, that prepared him to go to the front side and make a great difference for the nation of Israel. Fourth thought I want to give you is this. And this is the tough one when it comes to waiting. The only thing harder than waiting on God is wishing that you had. The only thing harder than waiting on God is wishing that you had. Waiting on God is hard because I want to do it in my own time, with my own season, with my own effort, with my own ideas. I don't know about you. Have you ever prayed a prayer that's like, God, I've got a really great plan for you to execute right now? And if you could do it my way, we'd have this thing done in an instant. I know you've prayed those prayers. But I think waiting on God brings us better fruit in the end than if we did it on our own. And if we start to do it on our own, we're going to live with regret for not having waited on Him. When we wait on Him, it's so important. It's so important because in the end, when we do that and we do that well, all of a sudden, life begins to change. And we see Him starting to put the pieces together with us. If we're patient, we have faith, and we are faithful where we're found. Last verse I have for you is this. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 11. Yet God has made everything beautiful for its own time. God has made everything beautiful for its own time. The season you're in right now may not be beautiful, but in time, you'll begin to see the flowers out of the dirt that you find yourself in. You may be on a mountaintop right now. You can see clear, you can breathe, the air is great, and that's awesome. But you know what? A valley is on its way. We all know that. We've lived long enough to know that for every mountaintop, there's a valley. And you may be in a valley season right now, but here's the encouragement in the valley. Trees don't grow on the mountaintop, they grow in the valley. Because it's the seasons of valley in our own lives that God really gets to inside of us, where we get that season of waiting and we embrace the process He's given us, that we genuinely start to grow. When you're on the mountaintop, you have no motivation to grow because life is going well for you. But when you get in those valley seasons and you dig into God and you find out that there's something that I need to be pressing into Him for, whether it's with the sheep in the pasture, on the battlefield, or anywhere else in your life, when we dig in, we grow. And you can't see it right now because in the valley, there's too many trees. The peaks are too high. You can't see where you are, but you need to know that God has an incredible plan. The verse continues like this. It says, He has planted eternity in the human heart. There's a piece of you that longs for God. There's a piece of you that knows that there's something beyond the life you're living right now. And it starts with a relationship with Him and grows with Him as you grow with Him. So He's planted eternity in the human heart, but even so, even with the knowledge that our heart longs for God, people cannot see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to end. We may not know all that God is doing, but we know that He's up to something. Well, we may not know how the end result looks because we may not have a box to tell us how all the pieces go together, but we certainly know that He sees it and He knows. And it's through that great faith that David began to walk out his life. He didn't become arrogant over becoming the next king. He didn't put himself at a higher place than his brothers, but he went back and he was faithful where he was found. And his faithfulness led to even more faith in God. And as he trusted God, as God was working him through the process and building him, God ultimately brought him to a place of his destiny. His destiny was the palace because his reality was the pasture and he worked through it well. The same is true with all of us. You may be going through a really hard season right now. It's okay. It's okay. It's a process. The best thing about knowing you're in a valley is knowing that there's a mountaintop coming. There's another one on the horizon. And you may not have the strength for it, but man, with Him, you sure do. You are never designed to walk through this life by yourself. You are designed to walk through life in relationship with Him. And it's His strength and His endurance and His working in you that you're able to accomplish all that He planned for you long ago. And a connection with Him means so much in that. So here's what I want to do with you. I want to pray a simple prayer. And some of you have felt disconnected from God for a really long time, and you're just wondering, am I in this never-ending valley that will never go away? You've felt so far from God, but can I tell you, He's never been far from you, even though your heart has felt far from Him. This morning, here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to pray a prayer with me. And the prayer is so simple. It's just turning the keys of your life over to Him. It's just saying, God, I surrender everything I am to you. The Bible calls this salvation. The reason being is because we're being saved from a past that was painful, a past that was without God, a past that was doing it on our own. And He's giving us a new life in Him. And so we're going to pray a prayer now. And in fact, if you don't mind, let's pray together. Maybe close your eyes, bow your heads, so there's no distractions, no one moving around, so that we can take some time to pray and ask God, work in us. With that, here's what I'd like you to do with me. I'm going to pray now. And if you feel like, God, this is what you want from me, go ahead and pray this prayer with me. Jesus, this morning I pray that you would give me a new life in you. Forgive me of all the things in my past that were separating me from you. I want a new, fresh start. I want a new life in you, Jesus. And I pray that this morning, that I'd find lots of hope, God, in you, a new life in you. And that as I walk through this life, that you would give me the strength I need to do what you, Lord, have called me to do. Thank you, Father. In your name we pray. Amen.